Dave Keys here. We're going to replay Periscope I did earlier today, and talking about 2008 market shenanigans, money markets back when investors withdrew about $550 billion in 2 hours and steered us toward a complete world financial collapse, and how that still impacts real estate right now. Because that is the backstory behind what's been going on in the run-up on real estate over the last few years, and why it's ending and it has stopped. And now we are facing the doldrums that the economy has actually been in all this time, as investors start to move away from what was previously more lucrative than it is now. And let's get started. There we go. I'm out on a morning walk. Let me go this way in case I capture this video. Dave Keys here, solutionsbydave.com. #1 real estate SEO expert in Google search. Always on page 1 for real estate SEO. Somewhere. Generally whatever you type about search engine optimization in real estate. Today, this is kind of a dry run, and I want to get this on a YouTube live stream, but right now I'm organizing my thoughts a little bit. But so about real estate, about the real estate market. First of all, the crash of 2008, there needs to be fundamental understanding of what happened in 2008, and essentially a lot of very bad loans were made to very unqualified people with no verified income. Lots of loans to get mortgages moving. Loans were rubber stamped en masse by big banks like Washington Mutual, now Chase. And so these loans aggregated in debt held by the banks, and they would bundle these up as AAA rated securities so that money markets, investors, and I may have my terminology wrong, but they were sold off as assets that were AAA rated, and it was really a sham, but it was going on because the banks were conspiring pretty much to keep writing these loans and then divest themselves of the liability of the assets. And so a few people, big banks, you heard of the term banks too big to fail, well, they ended up holding a lot of these assets. Sooner or later that was bound to blow up, and it did. And in 2008 the Fed noticed that about $500 billion was withdrawn over 2 hours from money market accounts. Interesting, that was 2000, and so or September 11th. They stepped in and they 2008, assured 11th. Coverage of those accounts, just like FDIC coverage of your bank account. So the Fed stepped in, and the first step toward the government taking on the liability for bad debts. And so that stemmed the sell-off, which they estimated would have hit about $5 trillion or something like that. I was just reading it, but trillions of dollars would have been withdrawn at that rate, which would have collapsed the U.S. economy and subsequently collapsed world economies. Now, we're talking about bank balances. And so you got countries in Europe where, like Greece as an example, negative bank balance. They can't print their own money. They have no sovereign currency. So they essentially are like any of us that run up too much credit, any corporation operating with too much debt, and then austerity measures just made that worse because there's no source of income because people's spending was curtailed. So anyway, back to the government steps toward what we call quantitative easing. And there were 3 phases of quantitative easing right away after the crash, and then again in 2010, again in 2012, the last one, where they just said they'll cover whatever they need to cover. Now, what are they doing? They are essentially increasing government debt. We went from around 5% debt to asset ratio or GDP before 2008, and we ran it up to about 10%, where it sits right now, about 10%. So it's a lot of debt. I mean, it's 10%, but it's still a lot of debt. So the government's shouldering these trillions of dollars of toxic assets for the banks, transferring money to the banks. Here's some money. Now go out and lend some more money somehow. But the banks said, oh great, money. Okay, and I got cut off by a phone call, and we're back talking about quantitative easing and banks like Chase, Bank of America. When the government printed this money, essentially, they printed it to transfer the liability of debt from banks after all they had done in selling bad loans, and transfer that liability to taxpayers, to the government. That's us. Of the people, by the people, we the people, now have this debt on our shoulders, and our grandkids, great-grandkids. But 5%, 10%, $20 trillion, and the government's like, we can handle $20 trillion, and so they moved this money over to banks in 3 phases, and the banks pretty much said, oh great, now we've got money to cover our negative assets, our liabilities. And understandably, they didn't necessarily want to just start handing out money in loans to people who weren't going to pay it back or wouldn't be able to, so they tightened credit policy. And so that did not lead to what the government wanted, which was to stimulate consumer spending, to make credit easier to get, and stimulate consumer spending, because banks didn't really lend out money that they were getting. They were like just breathing a sigh of relief. And so 3 times was not a charm. But the housing market began to pick up anyway, because where banks did not step in, there were investors. And investors started buying up real estate. Why? Because money markets were very low yields, and investors wanted better yields and a safe place to park their money, or at least to be able to speculate midterm anyway. And the novel thing about real estate is you can rent it and create an income stream and cover some of your investment, or all of it, or however you want to look at that. If you got cash and you pay cash for real estate, then outside your taxes and expenses, whatever money comes in, that's an income stream to start paying back on your investment right away. Plus you've got the intrinsic value of the asset. But that's where the problem comes, is intrinsic value only goes so far. And let's see, Wells Fargo is still offering 1% down. I have no idea. And I missed the second comment. Sorry, I'll type it again. But intrinsic assets, like real estate, have a certain value. But when you have the median price of a home, say in Palo Alto, in 1 year go from $2 million to $2.5 million, and these aren't mansions. These aren't even nice homes like the ones that I'm walking around in my neighborhood. No, they're 11, 12, 1,500 square foot, 50, 60-year-old homes. And real estate always bounces back. Well, yeah, maybe, unless you look at countries where they didn't intervene and investors aren't interested, like Japan, where real estate has been at less than 1% of growth for 20 years now. 20 years. No change. Intrinsic value. You got markets like Palo Alto, and this is what I'm going to talk about next, because we've got, America is on equity crack right now, I feel. Yeah, exactly, but it's ending. It's drying up. So here's what's been in the news over the last few weeks. And because I do search engine optimization for real estate agents, I'm always looking at every market, because I have to assess whether they're in a hot or cold market, what the status of inventory is. So do they need to focus on buyers or sellers? And of course, they all have to get more market share, because sales are tapering off right now. And we start with Aspen, Colorado. And in Aspen, the market fell by 45% compared to last year. Now, Aspen, Colorado homes start at about $5 million, so it's the rich who buy there, and they go up to $30–40 million for a mega mansion up on a mountainside with views of everything. And it's beautiful, but all of a sudden, people who are usually buying those homes stopped, or curtailed that market. And why? Because the value of real estate is running out of, in stocks you call it, what was that, price to equity, or anyway, the value of the price versus the actual intrinsic value as a multiplier, and that's happening in real estate. A home can only be worth so much. It's boards and bricks and stones and dirt. And so, I mean, you think about the actual value of materials and then the perceived value in the market. And somewhere that perceived value starts to tap out. Now, the next market, of course, we'll talk about several. The Hamptons, that's another market like Aspen, very high income buyers, but again, not happening anymore. Miami is right now in a downturn. These are all verified by recent news articles where people are like, in fact, one writer said, I've never seen anything like this before, because multiple high-end markets are, they haven't collapsed. Well, 45% is kind of a collapse, but it just stopped. The brakes got put on these markets. Palo Alto, Silicon Valley, California. And what's happening in Palo Alto is that in that whole area, the home prices are now getting so high that even the tech people who help drive those prices up can't afford to buy homes in that market. No, I'm sorry, I don't know Russian. I know one phrase in Czechoslovakian, Stashny Nový rok, which is Happy New Year, but yet, sorry, I don't know any Russian. But let's see, St. Petersburg, Clearwater. Yeah, Florida markets are not all like Miami. You know, they're still doing pretty good, and we're heading into season now. That's going to be telltale. In Florida, the season's the winter, when the snowbirds come down, and every year some of the snowbirds decide they've had it with cold, and so they buy property. We don't know what that's going to happen like this year. I'm working more on East Coast, Palm Beach, Gardens area, Fort Lauderdale. So we're waiting to see what happens. And right now my clients are working on acquiring market share through online visibility. But back to the markets in general, that these high-end markets, the prices have stopped increasing and the sales have decreased. Inventory is building up because one of the major drivers of those markets were foreign investors, especially in Palo Alto. And so investors come along, they got cash, and they're looking for a place to park it because bond yields are terrible, especially in a lot of foreign countries. They're terrible. And I think it said prices are going up and down. Somebody asked, they're not going up anymore. And if in fact, they're going down in my neighborhood here in Murrieta, California. Several houses have been on the market for months, and several price reductions because they overpriced. But anyway, these investors are looking at markets and deciding that now even the rents are making the property less attractive as the prices go up, and the rent has to stay, you know, within a certain range for them to pick up renters. What about, I didn't see that, you'll have to say it again. Sorry, the sunglasses are blocking my view of the comments. I promise if you pop it up again, I'll look at the question and try to answer. So anyway, long story short, the money return on investment just isn't what it was for investors, and so they've tapered off the buying in these markets. The U.S. economy, like I said before about quantitative easing, failed to really stimulate the economy the way the government and the Fed hoped. Kind of just stabilize things. I mean, in 2008, we were looking at a global financial collapse, at least on paper, like everybody's sheets going negative in terms of the banking system. That's why government stepped in and started feeding money to the banks. Printing money, whatever you want to call it. They had to fix that problem quick. And maybe they didn't do enough, maybe they did too much, depending on your fiscal views. But now we got government with 10% debt and an economy that did not respond to that. And certainly that means U.S. home buyers just aren't as big a share of the market as they used to be. And a lot of them are selling and buying on speculation. Their home value goes up, or they're downsizing. But the prices have topped out to where the value of these homes is not great for investors, and so they're not helping people buy them. Bank policies are still pretty liberal right now because they got into the game again a little bit, but that can only go so far. Certainly nobody's going to be writing loans for people who have no income like they did in 2007. So where do we go with this? Well, the supply of money dries up, and so the sale of homes curtails. It doesn't stop, but it certainly grinds down to a percentage. And what does this mean for real estate agents? It means that with less inventory to sell and buy, less buyers, and sellers facing maybe not profiting on the homes the way they hoped, and so you got a downturn in the market at best, unless anything closer to catastrophic happens, which is not entirely out of the question, because what we did before didn't really go away. It just got transferred to the taxpayer. How many times can we do that again, or how long can we do that? I don't know. Certainly, if there's no real appreciation in income in form of taxes to the government, then they're not going to keep allocating money to the same thing when it isn't working. And so, especially if fiscal policy remains fairly conservative, or at least timid, and I'm not saying whether it should or shouldn't be, but just what it is right now. So the availability of transactions declines. It's declining right now. Generally, it's starting these big markets, and it's affecting markets everywhere in the U.S. And the end game is that some agents are going to be dealing with musical chairs. Somebody's getting the deals and somebody is not. So the agent who survives is going to be the agent who adapts to the new real estate market economy, which is not the same as it is 6 months ago, and not even the same as now, but a decline, a real sharp, or not sharp necessarily, but a solid decline in real estate sales. Downturn through 2017, 28. Oh yeah. I mean, where's the money coming from? It's over. Quantitative easing, it did what it could. I don't think they're going to do a lot more of it, and the banks didn't respond that well to it, and a lot of the speculation on the market and price increases, other than pockets like Palo Alto, where there's real limited space, and a lot of tech firms, the market's slowing down, and that means agents have to take market share to survive. If you come in as a new agent, what are you going to get? Every other agent's already holding on to what they've got, and in musical chairs, somebody's going out, and so changing your marketing game, your real estate marketing game from what it has been is essential. Let's see. Good to know. Yeah. And it's not funny. Somebody's going to lose in terms of if you got 1,000 agents in an area that only needs 100, you got 900 surplus agents. They're not going to be making money. So that means if you're going to survive in a downturn, you better be leveraging strategies in your marketing to get market share, and not today's market share of necessarily buyers or sellers. You got to look at your market and see what's happening and determine whether your market is hot or cold, whether you're going to make money by controlling the listing or controlling a sale and attracting buyers. And in a lot of instances, attracting buyers, there's going to be fewer buyers like there are in these high price areas right now. Fewer buyers means you got to control that buyer's market. That's where online search and research, content marketing, positioning in Google search, visibility on other internet portals, that becomes critical. And your strategies need to target the right people very closely. So you need to understand who your market is so that you can target them with effective messages to get them to buy the product, which is not the house, it's the agent, it's you. Because if they don't choose you as an agent, then you and your business don't make money. So that's what you're selling in your marketing is yourself, your service, your agency, however you're structured in your business. And so I'm going to stop here, and I'll try to refine this a little bit for a YouTube post and a blog post. Solutionsbydave.com, or you can just look up real estate SEO expert or real estate marketing expert. I'm #1 for both of those terms in Google. So this is Dave Key signing off. Thanks for watching. See if I can get this to shut down now.